So he is quite right, even if he says, oh, there's nothing but my fantasy, you know. And of course that is the introvert. And that the introvert is always afraid of the external world. He will tell you, when you ask him, he will be apologetic about it. He will say, of course, yes, I know only my fantasies. And he has always a resentment. And as the world in general, particularly America, is extroverted like hell, the introvert has no place. Yeah. Because he doesn't know that he beholds the world from within. And that gives him dignity, and that gives him certainty, because it is, nowadays particularly, the world hangs on a thin thread. And that is the psyche of man. Assume that certain fellows in Moscow lose their nerve or their common sense for a bit, and the whole world is in fire and flames. You see? It is, nowadays we are not threatened by elementary catastrophes.
Dr. Jung, we know of your concepts of thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. And of course it would be very interesting to hear some expansion of the meaning of these particular terms as related to the introvert-extrovert dichotomy.
Well, there is quite a simple explanation of these terms, and it shows at the same time how I arrived at such a typology. Namely, sensation tells you that there is something. Thinking, roughly speaking, tells you what it is. Feeling tells you whether it is agreeable or not, to be accepted or not, accepted or rejected. And intuition, now there is a difficulty. You don't know ordinarily how intuition works. So when a man has a hunch, you can't tell exactly how he got at that hunch or where that hunch comes from. It is something funny about intuition. I will tell you a little story. I had two patients. The man was a sensation type, and the woman was an intuitive type. Of course, they felt attraction. And so they took a little boat and went out to the Lake of Zurich. And there were those birds that dive after fish, you know.
Yeah.
And then after a certain time they come up again, and you can't tell where they come up. And so they began to pit. Who first was the first to see the bird. Now, you would think that the one who observes reality very carefully, the sensation type, would of course win out. Not at all. The woman won the bet completely. She was beating him on all points. Because by intuition she knew it before.
I see.
See? Now, how is that possible?
Yeah.
Well, sometimes, you know, you can really find out how it works by finding the intermediate links. You see, it is a perception by intermediate links, and you only get the result of that whole chain of associations.
Yeah.
Sometimes you succeed in finding out, but more often you don't. So my definition is, intuition is a perception by ways or means of the unconscious.
Dr. Jung developed 8 different personality types. He did this by combining his notion of the 4 functions, thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition, and combining them with the notions of introversion, extroversion. Of all of these specific types, perhaps the most subtle and most difficult to understand was his intuitive introvert type. So it seemed quite in order to help us to understand more specifically what he meant by intuitive introvert type, to ask him to distinguish between the intuitive introvert and intuitive extrovert types. Let's see how he reacted.
Well, you know, you have chosen a somewhat difficult case, you know, because one of the most difficult types is the intuitive introvert.
Yeah,
you know.
I have.
The intuitive extrovert, you find among hunters, bankers, gamblers.
Yes.
That is quite understandable.
Yeah.
But the introvert the introverted variety is more difficult because he has intuitions as to the subjective factor, namely the inner world. And of course that is now very difficult to because what he sees are most uncommon things. And he doesn't like to talk of them, if he's not a fool, because he would spoil his own game by telling what he sees, because people won't understand it. For instance, once I had a patient, a young woman, about 27 or 8, and her first words were, when I had treated her, he said, "You know, doctor, I come to you because I have a snake in my abdomen." I said, "What?" He said, "Yes, a snake, a black snake, coiled up right in the bottom of my abdomen." And I must have made a rather bewildered face at her. And she said, "You know, I don't mean it literally, but I should say it was a snake. It was a snake." You see? Now, you see, our further conversation a little later was that she said, that was about in the middle of our treatment that only lasted for 10 consultations. She had foretold me, "I come 10 times, and then it's all right." I said, "How do you know?" "Oh, I got a hunch," you see. And really, about the 5th or 6th hour, she said, "Doctor, I must tell you, the snake has risen. It is now about here." Hunch. And then, on the 10th day, I said, "Now, this is our last hour, and do you feel cured?" And she said, beaming, she said, "You know, this morning, it came up and came out of my mouth, and the head was golden." And those were her last words. Now, you see, that same girl, when it comes to reality, she came to me because she couldn't hear the step of her feet anymore, because she walked on air, literally. She couldn't hear it. That frightened her. And when she came to me, I asked her for her address. And then she said, "Oh, pension so-and-so." Well, it is not just called pension, but it is a sort of pension. And it is, I never had heard of it. And now, I'm curious, I never have heard of that place. "Well, it's a very nice place," he said. Curious enough, there are only young girls there, very nice, and evenings. And I said, "But they amuse themselves all alone." Said, "Oh no, there are plenty of young gentlemen coming in, and they have a beautiful time, but they never invite me." It turned out that it was a private brother.
Yes.
Toward the end of our interview sessions, we thought it would be interesting to ask Dr. Jung to respond to questions concerning the contemporary scene. One such question related to his feelings about the excessive use of drugs in the United States and what he felt to be the cause of this excessive use of drugs. Let's see how he reacted.
American life is in a certain way so one-sided and so déraciné, uprooted, that you must have something to compensate the earth. see, you have to pacify your unconscious all along the line because it is in absolute uproar.
Yeah.
So at the slightest provocation, you have a big moral rebellion in America. Look at the rebellion of modern youth in America, the sexual rebellion and all that, because the real natural man is just in open rebellion against the utterly inhuman form of life. They are absolutely divorced, from nature, in a way, and that accounts for that drug abuse.
One of Dr. Jung's most provocative contributions is his analysis of alchemy and his attempts to relate alchemy to individual development and the unconscious. On the last day of our interview, we asked him to discuss his alchemistic philosophy and the way it relates to the unconscious. Let's look, finally, at these few comments of his on this point.
In our days, we have such and such a view of the world, such and such a philosophy, but in the unconscious you have a different one. And that we can see through the example of the alchemistic philosophy that behaves towards the medieval consciousness exactly like the unconscious behaves to ourselves. And we can construct or even predict our the unconscious of our days when we know what it has been yesterday. Now that is, with a few words, the development of my ideas.
In 1961, Carl Jung passed away. We hope these films will contribute to a continuing interest in his work.